President Trump signed an executive order yesterday giving Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency more power. According to a fact sheet provided by the White House, the orders direct agency heads across government to work with DOGE to take multiple steps to cut the size of the federal workforce. Those steps include only hiring employees for every 4 that leave. One employee, establishing new criteria for hiring, giving a DOGE team-led hiring approval over new career appointment hires, and preparing the agency for large-scale reductions in the workforce by figuring out which components or agencies themselves may be eliminated or combined. Meanwhile, Musk answered questions from media yesterday for the first time about the work of the DOGE team. Musk stood next to President Trump at the Resolute desk, trying to defend the work that his staffers have done, which has been criticized for operating with unchecked power. Musk railed against bureaucracy, calling it unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government. He was also pressed multiple times on his conflicts of interest connected to the massive government contracts his companies receive.
At a high level, if you say, what is the goal of DOGE, and I think a significant part of the presidency is to restore democracy. This may seem like, well, aren't we in a democracy? Rule of the bureaucrat. If the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy. We live in a bureaucracy.
But if there is a conflict of interest when it comes to you yourself, for instance, you've received billions of dollars in federal contracts when it comes to the Pentagon, for instance, which the president I know has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public. So if you see anything, you say, like, wait a second, hey, Elon, that seems like maybe that's, there's a conflict there. It's not like people are going to be shy about saying that. They'll say it immediately.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact-check this, apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly. I think that there's some worthy things, but overall, if you say what is the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
Elon Musk gave one example of a possible reform to the bureaucratic process. He explained how antiquated record keeping in a limestone mine is preventing government workers from retiring.
This is actually, I think, a great anecdote because we're told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And I'm like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, then the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down sometimes, and then nobody can retire.
So the mine Musk was describing is a real thing. David Fairnhold of the Washington Post covered it back in 2014, calling it the, quote, sinkhole of bureaucracy. David Ignatius, first of all, My chief complaint since DOGE began has been the lack of transparency. I do think it's good that Elon Musk went before reporters and answered questions. That's number one. Number two, let's just admit a few things here before we talk about conflicts of interest. For people that are watching at home going, well, why are they doing this? How could they do this? How could the American people go along with this? Most Americans, a majority of Americans think that the government is inefficient. Most presidents, from Ronald Reagan to Bill Clinton, think that the bureaucracy is inefficient and antiquated, and they've tried to update it. And, you know, Al Gore famously going on David Letterman to try to show his examples. I remember at one point, the Reagan administration, somebody saying to the Washington Post, you know, why did we even come here? You can't do anything. You can't update anything. So this is something that we've heard administrations complain about for 40 years. The biggest concern, of course, has been, one, whether they were doing it in a constitutional, lawful manner, and two, the lack of transparency. I'm curious what you saw yesterday in this press conference by Elon Musk, and we will get to the conflicts of interest, which obviously is a glaring red light there. But on these other issues, what were your thoughts about the press conference?
So the scene itself was bizarre. You had Musk in his MAGA hat, dressed all in black, a long coat that looked almost like a cape, with his young son, X, climbing all over him, climbing on the floor. President Trump often looking uncomfortable at the scene. So the scene itself was bizarre. The point you make that there is a fundamental problem here of a federal government bureaucracy that is too bureaucratic, too big, ill-managed. Every American has experience of that. And the idea of trying to make the government more efficient, reduce the level of spending, improve the technology. That's one of the worst things about how the federal government works. It works off of antiquated computers. That's an idea that people can support. But we're a country of laws. You can't just do things by edict. This is a problem that, as you said, Al Gore and so many other people tried hard to address. But you have to do it carefully because it's a pain in the neck. You'd love to just smash through, but we're a country of laws. That's the way we were designed. And I think that's the part of the Musk rush to change everything in sight that's most worrying. It seems to be being conducted without regard for our legal procedures. We're going to have some big court tests coming up in the coming weeks that are going to be decisive in showing what are the limits of what Trump's trying to do. But should there be efforts to reform the federal government, make it more efficient? Absolutely, no question about it.
Absolutely, and if you talk, I mean, there's some. We interviewed the Secretary of Defense a few years ago talking about had computers from the 1980s. So again, in theory, this would be wonderful. In theory, this is wonderful whether you're talking about the Pentagon, whether you're talking about the VA, whether you're talking about Social Security, anybody that has tried to deal with the IRS and how antiquated, and I may say, too, for Republicans, understaffed. All these agencies are. They're not going to tackle a $36 trillion debt by doing all the things they want to do and cutting some employees here and there. So, yeah, this is, I think, a concept that many Americans would support. A lot of independents would support. The question, though, is it being done legally? Is it being done constitutionally? And is it being done transparently? I think Elon Musk getting before reporters, I actually think as much as possible, since his people are running through these government agencies, I think that is extraordinarily important. And it's also, of course, most important that the letter of the law is followed, that the Constitution's followed, that actually Congress cares about its Article I powers. And interesting yesterday, the response to the court cases. We didn't get the sort of response that we heard from J.D. Vance and Mike Lee this weekend. You had President Trump saying he was disappointed by it, And of course, he would follow the law, but they would appeal some of these cases. So very interesting where we're going here. But again, I think we were talking in the break about Gaza. So much of that, I still think, is a smokescreen for something else. I could be completely wrong. I think it's a distraction to distract the public from other things. Again, I could be completely wrong there. But again, we all know they came fast to push all of these executive orders in the early days to throw people off balance. They threw Democrats off balance. They threw Republicans off balance. Republican senators have been around for decades. They were like, I have no idea what's going on here. This is insane. They threw the media off. So that was the purpose. And now, as things settle a bit, maybe we start to see the contours of what's legal, what's constitutional, and how the White House is going to respond to reforming government within those confines.